Hey, beautiful people, this is me, Yali Masa, or the Infinity Midwife, coming to you once again. I know you're taking care of your minds, your hearts, and your entire being. So, because tonight is a Thursday, and Thursday is usually a day ruled by Jupiter. It's a day of expansion. Okay, so let me just expand your mind tonight. You know, I don't want to do nothing too fancy or anything. You know, I'll just take it very basic. Okay. There was a topic I wanted to talk about because it's not spoken properly. And I feel like we can bring more clarity around that subject. Okay. So I feel like I know that you're taking care of your mind, your hearts, and your entire being. If nobody told you today, you are worthy of taking care of your mind, your heart, and your entire being. Okay. So there was something I wanted to talk about. I know I haven't been, regular on this channel, but, I am being inspired again to just come and bring and deliver another message. So I was inspired to talk about, Africa, the continent. As much as I am, I want to say fascinated by my people, my African people. I have not gone there since I was 4 years old, okay? So I have not put foot there yet, okay? Ever since I have gone there when I was a young girl. So, but I'm still fascinated by how, the variety and the complex, I want to say the diversity and the complex of understanding, our people. I have a lot of love for our people, my African people. I have a lot of love for you. So that is why I'm being called to do this message tonight. Okay. So, I've been having a lot of conversations for, I don't know how long, but ever since, I've had the occasion to see my dad having this passion for his own continent and definitely for his own country, I always was intrigued as to why, And I realized with time that, Africa is a fucking big continent. Okay? It's a big continent, and it requires a big mind to understand the variety of culture, of dialects, of language, of subtleties when it comes to how the continent is evolving. Okay. And, I always had debates, not even debates, just discussions with people, talking about, the development of the continent, where is the continent headed? I've seen both of my parents having passions for their country, Guinea. And I always imagine, what would it have been like if, my dad's ideas was to come to pass and to be realized, So I always had that passion for what the continent would look like, if people would agree, if people would work together, what type of continent we would have if people were, uniting for the betterment of the entire continent. And although I have not been, but I'm very much so fascinated by, the emergence of entrepreneurship, of, African youth, of, just so many projects emerging on the continent. I'm so proud. And every time I'm having those conversations with with different people that come from the continent, there are so many stories that needs to be shared about how the continent is actually evolving. Me living in the diaspora, I don't really get to see, I don't really get to experience, the whole African, lifestyle, because I have not been. But when I get to have conversations with different people that come from the continent, or that they've been there, or that they grew up there, they always come up with, how, us in the diaspora, we have a diluted, or we have a biased version of how, there's actual development happening on the continent, and I can just only, give praises and thanks to all those that are contributing in the betterment or in the development, the economical, societal development of the whole continent, whether it be on a micro level or on a macro level. I find it very brave that people from the diaspora go back and invest and open up businesses and try to make the continent a better place for its originators and for, tourists or whatever you want to call it, or even the diaspora. Okay. So, one of the things that always comes back around every time I have conversations with people that actually do come from the continent, and that we do have conversations, is how about, it's always turning around the entire idea that, some don't want to go back to live there, as opposed to some want to go and live there. And every time I ask, what is the reason? What is the triggering reason as to why, people don't want to move back there, or people don't want to live there? So there are many, many various reasons. One of them being political stability. When you are in a country where there's political instability, right, you can't really operate a business, or if you do, you have to have higher ups approvals, and you always have to give a hand out in order for your business to thrive, or even for your business to be recognized. So obviously, yes, there's always this side of corruption, systems of corruptions that are still, that still have a strong hold on the continent. But I feel like it is, slowly changing. Okay. Now, one of the things that I do headbutt with every time I'm having conversations about the continent is how, people always say the mentalities. Right? People have mindsets that keep the continent stuck. Okay? And that is why partly people don't want to go back to live there. People, they rather stay, in this part of the world where there is some form of stability. But as we are seeing things unfold, right, in the political scenery, or even governmental structures, we see that there is a heavy form of reveal being had, or just happening, in these times where, we see that there's a lot of corruptions that are being revealed. There's a lot of things ongoing that, are questionable as to, are those Western political structures, are they really stable? Are they really safe? Are they really, are those structures really winning and sustainable in the long run, right? As opposed to what can be done on our continent so that we can build better structures for the long run, right? So, one of the things that came up to me is, people's mindsets, right? I hear that a lot. Like, people have have these mindsets where, you know, they're always competing. There's always this illusion of separation. People are always, you know, they're always trying to one up on one another so that they can find their own stability. And I get it. It's very competitive. Not only very competitive, I feel that, you know, there's a lot of power dynamic struggles and a lot of what do I want to say? There's a lot of separation, illusions of separation dynamics, which makes it hard for people to get along or, you know, try to have a certain view as to how development can occur, and development can be sustainable, not just instant gratification development, but, you know, development that is sustained, you know, over a period of 50 years or a century, right? But as we see those Western structures being dismantled, whether you want to recognize it or not, they're being dismantled slowly but surely. We are being asked, you know, people in the diaspora, people on a continent, you know, what can we do? What can we do on the continent to change things up, right? Because we've been told that, you know, things will never change on the African continent. People, you know, you will find that there's always going to be a population that wants to migrate outside of the continent. You will always find, you know, those political corruptions. You will always find, you know, competitiveness when it comes to, you know, who is entitled to develop which sector or which economical sector. And I understand that, you know, it goes as well with the different tribes, the different classes of people, even the different religious classes of people. I feel like, you know, there's a lot of illusions of separation. And that to me is saddening, because in times that we're in times of changes, in times of you know, things being fully dismantled, I feel like this is the time, you know, this is the time for us to actually not necessarily work together, but have a vision for our continent where, you know, our soil can still remain ours, right? Because as I said in one of my videos, I feel like in the next maybe century, you know, if the youth, the population of the continent continue to migrate over here, and, you know, in the Western hemisphere or in the European or on a European continent, what will end up happening is you will find soil on the African land that will belong to, you know, foreign government structures, right? So you will actually find pieces of China in Africa, pieces of Europe in Africa, pieces of the States in Africa. Like, you will definitely have to walk with several types of passports when you're going to be traveling across the African soil. And I feel like that is that's one of the visions that I had, if, you know, things are not to be rectified. And when I say things need to be rectified, like, I'm not even talking about on a global scale as to how people need to come together and work together. I'm just saying, like, I feel like I'm talking to the youth, especially the youth nowadays. You know, I feel like the youth are coming more and more into, you know, wealth, into monies, into currency. You know, there are so many different little startups across the continent where, you know, people are feeling passionate about, developing their own startups. So, you know, not only they can benefit from their own soil, but they can share it with their communities or their countries or, you know, neighboring countries as well. And I find it very interesting that there is this trend that is emerging from the actual youth that are still standing on a continent. And my message today is basically one of self-love. I feel like, I know I'm here, like I have not put my foot on African soil in a minute. But if there's one thing that I do want to say across this message, is that we need to have a lot of self-love. Because self-love will break those barriers of illusions of separations. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like, when we talk about being sufficient, finding actual African countries that are sufficient, self-sufficient, and that are working towards, a sustainable development of their own country, whether it's working on their own currency, whether it's building structures that are sustainable in time. Like, I feel like there's so many things that are being done, right? Maybe not so much shared with us living in the diaspora, but I feel like if there's a message I want to send out tonight, is that my African people, we need to have self-love. It starts on an individual level, not even, sometimes I hear people complaining, saying, there's nothing you can do back on a continent because you need to know people that know people that know people. And, that's the way it's being done right now. But hopefully, we can come to agree that it's not only a collective effort that needs to be done. I feel like on an individual level, we need to start having a lot of self-love for one another in terms of recognizing or having the awareness of what is our individual imprint when it comes to building sustainability on the continent, right? And you have a lot of startups, or not even startups, but just initiative of being aware of the environment, right? You have initiatives of cleaning up the cities. You have initiatives of embellishing the cities. You have all these kinds of innovative ideas of just, giving certain cities, the proper image, but I feel like it can even go beyond giving it a good image. I feel like when we talk about self-love, on a micro level, I think that we need to push towards adding value to what it means to be African, to what it means to not only belonging to a tribe, a class, a religion, but what does it mean to be African in this 21st century? I feel like a lot of youth that are leaving, that are migrating outside of the continent, are wishing for some form of American dream where, they have the big house and the cars and they're flashing money and they're just living the life. But all in all, those that come here, they are faced with a reality that it is not as we see. The reality is other, right? Is not as we see it in those music videos where you have women in the strip club, men throwing money all over, making it rain, and then you have the big cars, the fancy cars. You got the big houses and the big low hanging chains and all of that. I mean, this is what is being promoted about this Western world, but the reality is other. Is not what it seems. And I feel that people from the diaspora play a major role into dismantling the fantasy that it is better over here, or there's less struggle over here. And I do want to say, yes, the struggles are not the same. It's not the same struggles, okay? Maybe on the continent, because of this community way of living, right? The lifestyle, you're gonna find food to eat, right? The fact that the continent in and of itself, it's in the southern hemisphere of the globe. You have the sun, you don't have harsh weather like over here. So maybe the structures or the management of structures is different, and the whole environmental management is not the same, right? But I feel like the struggles are different, right? Over there, maybe there's, what do I want to say? The sharing of wealth is not equalized amongst the population, right? And that's one of the biggest problems, is that when you do have self-love, you will think twice before going on a continent, buying yourself a fucking huge 15-bedroom home with the fanciest cars in a gated community right next to a community where people are actually struggling with, half a roof over their head, or, where they're fighting to find food at the end of the day, and that's one of the biggest, I feel like that's one of the biggest self-awareness that people need to have, like, especially if you're coming from the diaspora. One of the things I do want to say, like, Africans that do come over here, that do come to Europe and the Americas, and that do end up going back, right? They have that pressure of showing off like you've succeeded, when the reality is people do struggle when they do get here, because first of all, they have to adapt, they have to integrate, and then depending on the status that they've came in with, they have to, fight for their own way. They have to look out for themselves. They have to make sure that, they're following the rules and regulations. So it demands a lot of adjustment and adaptation. And so when those same people that struggle to find, food to put on the table and get organized and adapt, when they do get the chance to go back, I feel that they owe it to the people to speak on the realities of what is actually going on, even if they will look, they will be judged, right? They will be judged as to, you're telling us crazy stories because you just don't want us to go there. You want to be greedy with how good America is, or Canada is, or Europe is, right? But when you are faced with the type of struggles, or the type of struggles that you do or that you will come across because of adaptation, because of adjustments, because of, abiding by those new rules and systems, you find that people over here are, they're more closed off. They're not necessarily living in big communities like on the motherland. People don't even talk to one another. People are stressed. People are dealing with mental and emotional stresses that they put on, that first of all, that they feel pressured because they need to send money back home. They have other type of responsibilities, so they're not even living for themselves because they have this image of the one that made it, and they have to uphold to that image, right? But all of these, I call them burdens or curses. All of those curses need to be dismantled, because at the end of the day, I feel like it's like a vicious circle where there's this constant need to prove that you've made it, but on the other hand, you are constantly struggling to maybe make ends meet, or maybe, following your actual dreams. If you've come here to study, like, you can't necessarily work, or if you work, you have to do it in a way where, you're not going to be traced. Like, there are so many other type of strategies that when those same people that made it here go back on the motherland, they need to uphold a certain image of success and victory in order to, make sure that the family and the public, I mean, it's just superficial. Okay, that's what I want to say. Like, it's superficial. People put burdens upon themselves to uphold a certain image of themselves that they damn well know it is not the truth. It is superficial. It is not going anywhere, and it's just, sickening them, right? Because they wanna be seen as the one that made it, right? But the one that made it isn't telling you that, he's working 10 hours a day under the table, and that he might lose, he might be deported if he gets found out by immigration, or that, he has to go to school and pay like thousands of dollars because he's an international student, or, maybe because, like, they have a crazy amount of pressure upon them. And then when they go back with a mask, with a false mask of success, of victory. And they're just going back for the show of, spending money on people, showing them that, they're living the American dream when they're not. And when you get here and you see them struggle, or they're not situated the way you thought that they were, you realize that, okay, like, this is a secret, but we're not going to tell. Like, we're going to keep it between us. And then when we go back on the continent or in our country, we're going to flash. We're going to show them off. And then we're going to come back. And then we're going to struggle again. And then we're going to go back and show off. And then we're going to come back some. Like, it's a hamster wheel. And it never stops. It's a vicious circle. But what that does is that it reinforces the fantasy, or the false idea that there's an actual prosperity outside of the continent. And that needs to stop. This is why I'm pushing for self-love, because when you have enough self-love and you realize that, this what's it called? There's a word for it. El Dorado? When we talk about like this paradise that exists, but nobody ever seen it, but it exists. I feel like this is like a biggest lie that is being told to African, especially the youth, especially through music and videos and movies. Like, they are pushing for this narrative of this El Dorado that exists somewhere, but nobody has ever seen it. And then once you actually get to your destination and you're just really deceived and disappointed, you have to keep it to yourself and then mirror back the image or the mask of success and victory to those that are standing in the continent in hopes that it actually exists. And in reality, it doesn't. Right? That's just a vicious, it's a vicious cycle that needs to end, because when that is going to be, I don't know whoever is going to create a documentary, like multiple documentaries of, what's it like to live in foreign land when you are an African migrant. Like, how is it really like? I know there are documentaries that talk about those that take up boats and that try to come into Europe through Spain or through, the Arab countries. Like, they suffer. They go through hell. And when they come back, they're being exiled from the communities and their families because they are seen as failures, Like, come on, people. Like, there needs to be a campaign of nationalism on the continent to not only create jobs. I don't feel that that's the government to do it. I feel like, yes, the government has governments have strong responsibilities in creating jobs, but I feel that it's also on an individual level to get the awareness of, how is the continent so rich and nobody dares, working the land, right? Everybody's like, we ain't gonna work the land because, first of all, the land isn't sacred. Like, there's a lack of awareness on the type of, or not even a lack of awareness. Like, some will say it's laziness, some will say it's just people aren't invested in working their own land. If it's not an initiative that is being pushed by the authorities, people won't go toward the land. Or people won't work the land, or people won't put the effort in working the land because they uphold a certain fantasy of what life should be. And it should be luxurious. It should be, throwing money around, and it should be about fancy cars and big houses and hoes. Right? But I feel like there needs to be campaigns of desensitizing. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Or maybe bringing sensitivity to the issue of, of that fantasy, right? That fantasy that is being strongly pushed onto the youth as to what is it really about the Americas where, the struggles are different, okay? Like, I'm living over here. I can tell you for a fact, like, when people talk to me about the continent, they tell me how it is. I'm like, but you guys are telling me, like, you guys are living really, really well. Like, y'all are living in community, y'all are doing so many things, and then, but why do you come here then? And yes, I mean, it's okay to be ambitious, to have aspirations, to study, to do all these things. But there needs to be more self-awareness around, encouraging the diaspora or the people that actually do come here for work or for study, to actually guarantee them some form of, I want to say retention, right? Like when they finish studying or they finish, working here, that there's some form of retention waiting, like a retention package waiting for them so that they can go back, and there's an actual, there's a whole tunnel of how, they can be restored on the land, or they can find work, or they can create jobs. Because I feel like, like, people do come here, and then there's this vicious circle of, getting more money in order to go back there and flaunt it or show it off. And then, even going back and have this big house, a huge house. And it's just like exporting this fantasy on the continent, when in reality, I feel like there's so much to do, right? And I feel like if there could be just a little bit more of self-love, where, people have that awareness of understanding that the continent in and of itself is rich. Like, the reason why I'm feeling called to do something eventually on the continent is because I have passion for the continent. I know it's hard. I know that not everybody, get to make it, or to have a startup that's gonna boom and be very stable and withstand time. I get that, but there needs to be some form of awareness around how is it possible for individuals, like regular citizens, to actually get some form of land. I mean, they do it over here. Like, like, I'm just gonna do a quick parallel as to, over here, people are being encouraged to buy houses outside of the big cities, or, to buy land. And, there are some programs to help people, get situated. They're doing that for their people over here. But I feel like, there are certain ideas that needs to be exported on a continent as to how, wealth can be distributed accordingly and with equality, so that those that actually do leave can actually come back and there's something waiting for them, so that, they don't feel encouraged to stay here and continue the vicious cycle of, of mirroring a fantasy that is not really a fantasy, that is not really a reality, right? So that's the type of message that I wanted to say today, because I feel like, one of the ways to do that, or to dismantle that idea of that fantasy, is to actually start speaking up as to what is the reality. Not in the sense that we want to block people or be, cock blockers when it comes to cock blockers. Like, those what's it called? Those pessimistic views of the external world or the Western world, or like, we don't want to talk people out of reaching their goals and their ambitions. But I feel that as much as there is an American dream, I feel like there needs to be a definition for the African dream, right? And people need to focus on that more. What is the definition of the African dream? Because it exists. I'm pretty sure it does. And it does not need to look like the American dream. It can just be naturally the African dream. And people should aspire to have a form of vision that is very much so representative of what is the African dream. When I think of the African dream, first of all, I think of collaboration, right? People are living in communities, but people are fighting amongst one another to find food, monies, situate themselves, find wealth. Like, I feel that there's still this heavy competitiveness when it comes to the distribution of wealth, right? But I feel that we should all start dreaming about what is the African dream. When I think about African dream, I see a diversity of people. I see wealth being distributed equally. I see, I see self-awareness and people starting actually having love for the soil, because the soil is like a golden mine. Like, when I hear stories or when I watch documentaries of people taking boats to die in the seas and the oceans, like 20 years old, 19, 15 years old, who risk their lives when they're sitting on a gold mine, but they don't know what to do. I feel like, they need to be inspired in thinking of how can they create this African dream, right? So that we're no longer chasing a dream that is not ours to begin with, right? We need to start thinking about what is the African dream, and just ponder upon that, because talent exists, infinite abundance exists on the continent, and you will find that people do incredible things with things that you thought was garbage. Well, someone is using it and is utilizing it to maybe create electricity, make windmills, create cars. Like, there's so many things that people are doing on the continent, and we don't necessarily hear about it in the diaspora. But I feel that there is an individual responsibility when it comes to creating a better image of what the continent can be like, can feel like, and people can start fantasizing about, living the African dream. It is something that we definitely need to ponder upon. And those that do come here to study, to work, and that do happen to go back on the continent, make it a responsibility to dismantle those ideas, those false storylines of success and victory. Not to say that you can't find success and victory, or you cannot be victorious here or successful here. But we need to redirect our attention of what it is to be successful and dream about this African land on the continent in and of itself. Okay? So that was my little pep talk for tonight. I feel like we need to expand on what it is to live the African dream. Okay, so let me just pull a bit of oracle cards, and then we're just gonna close it off because we're 40 minutes in it. 40 minutes. We are in the 40-minute mark. I just feel like I feel like people need to change. There's a real what I want to say, not a need, like a necessity. But we are entering in this time of change where I don't want to say there's a change in awareness that is being had right now on the continent, and I feel like the change is going to come from the those that are being underrepresented. I don't even know what I'm saying, but it's definitely going to come from classes of people that aren't being heard, meaning from children and women. Okay. Because you do find men across all arenas of society, right? They hold the power structures in place, but you find a lot of corruption as well. So I feel like women need to speak up more, and children need to be considered more. When it comes to, because I feel like there's not so much consideration for children when it comes to, molding the minds of the African youth. Yes, they dream, and they have a lot of initiative, but I just feel that, it needs to be recentered on self. And when I say self, I'm also speaking of the environment of the continent in and of itself. Right? And it needs to be promoted. People need to hear about those successful stories of people coming in and working together, a community, in order to change the mindsets of, what it means to be successful and wealthy on the continent. And we all have a responsibility to uphold when it comes to that. Like, we cannot just be here and, living this American dream. Okay, and this came out in reverse, purity. I love this card. Y'all know I love this card because this card speaks of, in the upright, it speaks of authenticity, right? But because it came in the reverse, I feel like one of the issues with the African essence is inauthenticity. We are not ready to call ourselves Africans and to own it to ourselves, to stick with it. I feel like, yes, we call ourselves Africans, and then we have the whole culture that comes with it, and we are very much so appreciated for that, and we appreciate ourselves for that. But I feel that we're still struggling with a certain nationalism that is I want to say that is in integrity with the environment, with the soil. I feel that we are African, or people on the continent say they're African as much as, they're eating right, they are having money, or And the minute that, like they're struggling, or, they can't, I don't want to say that, but I do want to say, like, we need to have this, like, we need to have another redefinition of what it means to be African. Because today, when you go on a continent, you will find Chinese speaking Igbo. You will find people speaking different languages. Like, they can call themselves African too. So what will differentiate, someone that came in, a tourist that came in and lived on a continent for 20 years versus an actual original African that lived and that has his ancestral line on the fucking continent? Like, how can you make the difference? Is it the one that came in and that fucked around on your land, that is speaking your language that you're gonna call African? Or, like, how are you going to make a difference? Because as we are advancing in time, I feel like, the continent in and of itself is being hijacked because we are being inauthentic on the relationship we uphold on the land. We're not even, I feel that throughout religion and throughout culture and throughout globalization, we've dissociated from the land, right? Land being marked or being seen as, of the devil. You can't really work with the soil because that's an underdog type of job. Nobody wants to do agriculture because, again, it's only for those living in the village, or it's not sexy, it's not it's not really American, like, what I'm saying? Like, there's stereotypes, there's this notion that, you are African, but, you need to be stylish African type of thing. You can't really doing certain type of jobs. If you go to school, you need to go into finance or be a doctor or a lawyer. Like, what I'm saying? Like, we need to redefine what it means to be authentically African. And that responsibility is not up to no one else but ours on an individual level, not even on a collective or on a structural level, but on an individual level. We need to start dreaming of, what does it mean to be African? How can we be authentic about what it means, about redefining our identity of being African? Like, I was born here on a foreign soil, but I don't identify with the soil as much because I feel that even here there are structural, or there are, I want to say, there are unseen, not even unseen forces, but unseen stigma, right, around what it means to be Canadian, or what it means to actually live on Canadian soil, right? If you have to have the right skin color in order to be recognized as one of theirs, right? And that is one of the main, I want to say, that is one of the main struggles that someone like an African that actually was born on a foreign soil will find. You are originated on this land, like you came about on this land, you are native to this land, but you are still looked upon as a migrant or as someone that is not of this soil. So as much as I want to have this nationalism and this sense of belonging to this land, I still feel called that, I have a stronger hold on the motherland, because not only because of the color of my skin, but I just feel called there as opposed to here, right? I feel like there's better opportunity for me to develop there than here. Right? Yes, there needs to be enlightenment, enlightened action, meaning innovative ways of redefining the African dream. Anyways, that's what I wanted to say. Right? People need to feel happy when they say they're African, and there needs to be a follow through, right? Yes, we don't just go back to the continent for enjoyment and having fun, right? There needs to be a more pure and deeper sense of what it means to be African. What does it mean? Like how deep does it go? How deep does the identity of being African goes, right? Yeah. Okay, well, that's all I wanted to share with you guys tonight. I hope you enjoyed this little conversation, or this little sharing of mine with y'all. So I know you're taking care of your minds, your hearts, and your entire being. And until next time. Okay, yeah. Okay, there. Okay. Let's see, what can we pull out? I'm just being called to do that, so I'm gonna do that, and then I'll close it off. Okay. So what does it? Yeah, I feel that people need to reconnect with the land. You know, sometimes, you know, I'm a herbalist. I like plants. I like mixing plants in order to get a desired result for my health. Okay. And when I hear stories of, you know, Africans will not hang around people that are herbalists, or people that you know, that are in the knowing of herbs, or like there's so many it's just bothering me as to how people there's so much illusions of separations for pettiness. Yes, there's a strong need to purify what it means to be African, because I feel like it got so diluted. And purification is the card that came out. And then peace. We need to make peace as to, you know. Yeah. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. So take care of your minds, your hearts, and your entire being. And until next time, I love y'all.